Welcome to a true spiritual adventure story like the world has never known. Volume 2, Rise of the First World Teacher, with your host, Dr. James Yogadhi Weldon. Thank you for joining us. This is Dr. Jim Weldon Yogadhi, sharing from my personal autobiography, second book. It's entitled The Rise of the First World Teacher. At this time, my business has collapsed. The home that we were planning to buy in Colorado is gone. We were invited to go to the northeastern region and to teach in a region called Assam. And Assam is a protected territory where there had been fighting and conflicts going on for a long time. And those of you that know a little bit about the future history which happens there, many of these individuals that may have been led into terrorist activity are given an opportunity to drop that. Now there are virtually no teachers in this region, and many hundreds centers have been founded, ashrams have been founded, retreat centers have been founded. So many good projects have been done in that region. And we were playing our small part. And we had been in India, and the word had gotten around in the news that in the northeastern region now for a few months. Now we were thinking about taking a little vacation because we've been teaching virtually nonstop now for several months, traveling from city to city to city. So every few months we take a little vacation, and then we would fly back to Bangalore, maybe to Delhi or somewhere else. And then we would return to our teaching post. And that would really be our schedule now for about 10 months. And one of the beautiful lessons that I learned here is that the singing, the meditation, and the community building really can improve the life in these communities. And we went to many different cultural events here at places that I would never imagine. Sometimes some of the programs are for the military. There'd be battalions of soldiers in the military. At other times we teach in a Hindu community. The next day we'd be in a Christian church, a seminary. A few days later we'd be in the Jain community beside a naked saint, asking us what it would be like to go to the United States. And a few days later, we would teach to some tribal members who were actually involved in the resistance against India. And one of the reasons that we were asked to go there is that because of the political situation, none of these tribal groups would really take the program from the Indian. And it was very interesting. Wherever we would go, a door would open. At one point, we meet with government leaders, and at one meeting, we meet an officer in charge of the police for this entire province that we've been teaching in. And when we meet, he says that something here in the country is really interesting is happening. He says to us, about 4 months ago, something happened in this whole region that started making my job a lot easier. In this particular region, I noticed a dramatic change. I don't know what it was, but the fighting started going down. And the number of attacks against the police, even reports of crime, have been going down. And I saw it in this city, and then he pointed and he said, then I saw it in this city, and then I saw it in this city. He pulled out a map and started pointing to the city. I don't really think much about these words until later, but when we trace these dates and then the places that we teach, they correlate with the dates that we'd arrived in each city. Seeing this, I remember our first evening, as there were 4 of us sitting together, we made a promise we would start immediately, and then we start singing. We start a bhajan. And the joy that we were feeling at the time was so powerful that we know that we've made a really great beginning here. And even though we don't realize it at the time, we have a huge subtle influence, we believed, in all these towns that we visit. And I see that as we travel around from place to place, meet maybe 25, 50, 100 people, and now several hundred at a time, we're having a very real subtle effect. Maharishi was speaking many times years earlier of this effect, which he called the 1% effect. He said that if 1% together, or even a smaller number, the square root of 1%, if they came together with intense spiritual practices, they could actually bring harmony to an entire society. And I'd never seen this effect validated by scientific research work with my own eyes. He said that the happiness and the joy of a few people can affect thousands, even millions, from this subtle level of creation, because we're all connected at the deepest level. And I believe the police commander was telling me about the larger effect of our work. During that year, we had the opportunity to expand our horizons, and we traveled to many places in India also, then to Nepal, then to Thailand and Hong Kong, China, even South Korea. We traveled in this northeastern region, but we also went other regions as well. And in many cultures, I see the same loving heart. I'm beginning to feel that. And it was a really beautiful experience. I believe perhaps from part of this world, possibly from Tibet. I spoke earlier that I had believed all my life and had experiences from childhood that I did have a past life in Tibet. And it turns out that the region where I lived in Tibet was very close to Assam. I never discussed this with Shishri, he just sent me there. And at one point we visited a temple there, a Ramakrishna temple, at a very remote, high location on the border between India, Burma, and Tibet. And as soon as I see it, I remembered, honestly, being there in the past. And that location is near a border crossing where I personally believe that I'd come across while helping people to bring people. And some of the holy relics help people bring out of this country prior to me ultimately being captured, because I kept on going back and passing away in prison in that last life. And of course, Shri sent me to jail to teach. And I didn't want to go. And here I was in a big jail. A whole country was a jail. It was a difficult time for everybody. And I was just experiencing a small part of that. So as soon as I arrive at this temple and see that Ramakrishna temple, I'm literally shaken and tears are running down my face. I rushed into the main building and I picked up an orange shawl that was handed to me by one of the monks there, throwing it about my shoulders. And I'm sitting in the temple and I'm meditating for some time and reliving now the days of marching in the cold over those nearby mountain peaks. Honestly, almost freezing and starving in that past incarnation, traveling so long. Finally, we would arrive at this safe location and given some shelter. And as far as I can tell, some of the buildings are the same. And I realize in those moments that by coming to Assam, again in this lifetime, and helping these natives, I believe that I'm resolving some of the weight that I was still carrying from those times. And I still have that shawl, by the way. It was actually made by the natives. Seeing it brings me back to that time again. I see myself as the Lama yogi that I also am in this life. And it's interesting, you might be surprised to learn that even though I was there, right on the border, it didn't even occur to me to go over that border crossing that I knew was so close. I couldn't even turn my head in that direction, in a sense. And when we walked out of that small ashram in school, there's a path to it that leads in that right direction. And unconsciously, I turned my head away and walked rapidly to our waiting taxi. Even now, over a decade later when I'm writing this, I have an abiding fear about that nearby border. And when we went to Nepal a few months after visiting this border in this ashram in Assam, but even then, when I'm so close to Tibet, it doesn't even occur to me, this is surprising, to go into Tibet. Not even a thought. In a sense, I guess I had unconscious blinders on, because perhaps if I saw what happened and the destruction to the heritage of the capital there in Lhasa, it would totally break my heart. And when I looked at in that region, I knew many of the names, and I'd had some of those names in my mind before. And I woke up one morning before ever seeing a map with the name of that town where I lived on my lips. I saw it, I knew the name, and then I looked later and saw it on the map. Pretty incredible. And the big temple in Tibet, the Potala temple in Lhasa, the capital of Tibet. Sometimes I find myself wondering about this ancient center, Potala, this great temple, in my dreams. Sometimes I see those memories. I see myself walking in the streets of that spiritual capital of Tibet, Lhasa. Part of me knows those streets, as incredible as it may seem. How do I know? I don't know. I just do. Someday, maybe I will be able to return to a free Tibet. I'm praying for that, of course. You may remember that on my first trip to India, I literally run right into the Dalai Lama. I meet him face to face as soon as I get off the airport. So just before the end of this journey, I did have a chance to meet with the Dalai Lama again in Bangalore. This time the contact continues over several days, and I have a chance to speak to a major group of his senior monks about these memories that I have of Tibet. And with that contact, seeing him again, how wonderful that was. He came to the Art of Living Retreat Center and had a public talk with Sri Ravi Shankar. And with that contact, I feel now this part of my life is blessed and complete. And this tragedy that I've held in my heart has been cleaned by being given the chance to provide service to those great people in Assam and also in Tibet. And after 10 glorious months, our longest visit to India, a few weeks of traveling after that in other countries, finally Sri says it's time to return to the United States. Before that, he wouldn't let us go. I've had this happen before. He kept me there. Rama and I arrived really back in the United States feeling like foreigners in our own country. Like first-time visitors, we marvel at the roads and the comfort of this country. After such a long adventure, about a year, I'm not ready to start our life in Colorado again. And as I said before, this company that I had collapsed and everything that we had in a semi. Instead, we take the opportunity to teach at one of the largest Indian and American communities in the United States that's coming up in Dallas. And after such a time, it seems so superficial and selfish for me to think about looking for a job or to try to do something to rebuild my business. Compared to the work that we've been doing the last year, coming home here was like waking up from an unbelievable high spiritual experience, and to realize that the world we've been living in is actually like a dream world. And after a few days home, Boulder, we load up a few things in our car and we're driving on the highway from Colorado to Texas to open up a new center. Sri suggested that we rent a house and set up a little retreat center or an ashram. And on the way to Texas, the 9/11 attack on the World Trade Center happens. In the space of a few minutes, one of the pivotal events of our world occurs as two planes fly into the Twin Towers in the World Trade Center and another plane hits the Pentagon. And that's when things change. Everything changes for many people. And we enter also a very difficult time, not only for the United States, for us as well. And so from here, we begin a new chapter, which I'll talk a little bit about that. And the title of this chapter is Surviving the Cycles of Time. And there's a poem here, and the poem goes this way. Why things happen as they do is difficult to say, because at every moment we're touched by the whole universe. What can be said is, I don't know. But there is another I don't know. And this is the beautiful I don't know of the infinite consciousness that knows everything, and yet it does not know it, because knowing nothing has its own fullness as well. This is one of the greatest mysteries of them all, because even this vast, great consciousness even amazes itself. Now, some of you that are hearing this, and these aren't all my own words, because after this effusion in the knowledge, these years and having a chance to teach and travel and express my gratitude for being given the opportunity to do this, the life that that great being is certainly in me as well. This is the discovery. So everything in this universe occurs in cycles. And really, a lot of these cycles repeat themselves in various ways over and over again. We all experience these cycles of good and difficult times. And we are all influenced by the universe in ways that we don't fully realize. A little over 30 years before the 9/11 Twin Towers disaster, it was 1970 for me. And this is just the time before I started meditation, and it was the most difficult time of my life. It's the time in my story where I was almost shot, and I perhaps could have been killed by the police. If you would look back, you would see 30 years earlier, we were really in a lot of ways in the middle of a war. In about another 30 years before that, there was another war. Some of these cycles repeat themselves according to the Vedic astrological point of view. And in my case, I was told it was associated with Saturn and its 29.5-year revolution around the sun. What happened in the world from the millennium 2000 onwards to 2012 is similar to what happened in the 1970s with our world in turmoil. But in many cases, many spiritually advanced cultures have spoken of the time. Even the Mayans set this 2012 as an important final date of their calendar. What few people know is that this culture did have its roots in an enlightened sage. Sri talks about this, called Rishi Kapila. Exactly how long ago? Perhaps 5,000 years ago. Actually, in the epic stories of the Puranas, also many thousands of years old, they say that this Rishi, his name is Rishi Kapila, lived by the sea, and it gives some directions of where he lived. And this is just an interesting aside, but it's something to think about. These Puranas say that if you travel in a northeastern direction from India, you will come to a northern ocean. If you travel over that ocean, you will find the hermitage of Rishi Kapila. Sri told me, and a few others that were there, that the name California, this is when we were in California doing a program there, he talked about that the name California comes from the name Kapila, California. And over time, the pronunciation gradually changed, and that spiritual tradition that began in Southern California had a tremendous effect on all the peoples, the Native Americans and the tribes during that time. You can only wonder about it, but you can look it up. Regardless of anyone's opinions about 2012, the next few years were really difficult times for us, physically, mentally, and spiritually. And I don't understand this. I'm passing through it. Although Sri had said in meetings with many teachers that the coming years would be very difficult. For me, it feels as though my connection was somehow turning on and off many times beginning in the year 2000. For reasons I didn't really understand at the time, suddenly I would feel fear, and then worry would follow. It's one of the superficial reasons, perhaps, that Rama isn't working, and neither am I. The company that I'd set up shut down for lack of funding and management conflicts. And we spent a year in Texas setting up that center and really had a wonderful time there in Dallas. Many great friends still there because we traveled around and met some great friends there. And we moved back to Colorado to a friend's house before we move into a new home that we've purchased. And during the time, I start having these wild thoughts, very strong feelings, having fear, even feeling life-threatening feelings for no apparent reason. And I don't see how this can be, even with all that I've been through. And I found myself living in a dark, desperate place again from time to time. One night, I go down in the basement because I can't sleep, and I literally start to shake and tremble. And I wonder if I'm having some kind of seizure. Headaches of various degrees have been going on for several months for no apparent reason. And it's almost bizarre, this set of symptoms. And I feel sometimes during that experience as if literally my brain is being crushed. And in spite of the financial strain, we decided we're going to go to India for a few weeks again this year. All of this is resolved there, what I've been passing through in the last few months. This is my personal autobiography. Take it as you will. The second book, The Rise of the First Great Spiritual world teacher, which I believe she is, and how I resolve these really nightmares and these really dark experiences that I've been going through in preparation maybe for some of the work which is coming down the road here. I do appreciate you taking the time. And if this inspires you to deepen your life, please consider this wonderful organization. Take time to come back to your heart and learn to live in the home of the heart, which is the home of the whole universe. Be extra friendly and loving to people. Do something good. Join me again here in this next chapter's conclusion. Namaste. And Jai Gurudev. Thanks for joining us in our YouTube channel, books, podcast episodes on living the enlightened life, and autobiography with your host, Dr. James Yogadhi Weldon.